Hello, this is John Morris Pendleton, chemist, scientist, auto mechanic, mid-husband, father of 8, happily married man.
Ah, trouble at home? You want to talk about it?
We have this diagram of evolution which tries to give us the idea that from one cell to a multi-cell and different creatures that eventually we evolved into man. Now that's a drawing, it is not science.
Okay, sorry I asked. You changed the subject pretty quickly, it's clear you don't want to talk about it. So, as far as the drawing, I think people understand that that diagram of yours is not the scientific documentation of evolution. Well, most people do. So it's kind of a silly thing to even mention, but whatever. Now, since you jumped right into it and we're prematurely into the main part of the video, we need this.
Now, I would be sorry if it would happen, but it does happen that if you have a pet cat or pet bird or a pet dog, they die sometimes.
You know, someone asked me in the comments if these videos of yours were directed towards kids, and this kind of thing is why I can't figure out if they are. Because if they're for adults, telling them, look, I know this is going to be sad to hear, but sometimes your pets can die, is incredibly insulting to their intelligence. And if they're for kids, they're so fucking boring that I can't see a kid sitting through more than about 30 seconds of them.
Now, if you put your dead pet out in the front yard or in the backyard, and you put a sign out, scientific experiment, fossil formation, you will not make a fossil. First, it will rot and stink. It'll grow ugly-looking worms, and it'll just be a mess.
Jeez. You know, little Timmy, I'd be sorry if it had happened, but sometimes it happens that your pets die. But don't worry, we'll bury it in the backyard, and it'll get a bunch of nasty worms, and rot, and stink, and just be a mess. Seriously, dude, you need to figure out who your target audience is.
You need rapid death, rapid burial, rapid pressure in order to make a fossil. Whenever fossils are found in the ground, they're always found without a name tag telling us what it is, or a sticker telling us how old it is. People, according to their beliefs, according to their way of looking at things, put on the names and the dates. As we already saw earlier in our 5th conference of how the dating method just does not work. Things are basically young. It's a young Earth. Not millions of years old, but a few thousand of years old.
Oh, I get it. So your point is that we shouldn't believe the scientists because they're identifying the age of things based on their own beliefs and way of looking at things. We should believe you because you're identifying the age of things based on... Oh. Yikes.
Now, in the evolutionary idea, we expect in this upper part of the diagram to see a series, a sequence, a chain, if you please, of slight gradual changes from one species to another, each one changing a little bit more, and thereby we get all the different life forms through a chain of changes. And we would expect to find these in the fossil record.
Okay, yeah, so far so good. We see that. Let's move on.
We believe that there was a worldwide flood that buried lots and lots of living things, and now they're fossilized. And so we'd expect to find exact, distinct species fossilized.
Oh no. No. No! Not even you!
But there won't be any intermediate or transitional connection between them.
Oh no, John. I want to like you so much. Don't make me hate you. Don't go full Crocoduck.
First, let's take a look at some very interesting fossils. These two are especially interesting. Here you have a larger fish caught right in the middle of swallowing a smaller fish. And all of them are fossilized. Now, for one thing, this is a good evidence for rapid death, rapid pressure, rapid burial, as would occur in a worldwide flood.
How does a worldwide flood factor into this? Why not just a flood? And that's just if we assume that a flood can cause a fish to die so instantly that it doesn't even have time to open its mouth.
And so this actual transparency was taken from that book, and this is what it says. A dead bluegill falls to the bottom of a lake. Sediments slowly cover the intact body. Many millions of years later, the lake disappears, And the superimposed sediments press the fish and obviously forming it into a fossil. Now, let me ask you folks, when a fish dies, if it's not real big, what usually happens to that fish? If it dies in your aquarium or dies in a river or lake, what happens to that fish? Does it sink to the bottom of the lake or float? It floats, doesn't it? But here, Life magazine is telling us that it sinks to the bottom.
So what you're telling me, John, is that every lake and ocean in the world which is inhabited by fish has a layer of dead fish permanently floating on the surface. That's what you're telling me? Because that doesn't quite match reality.
Now that's not true to what we have observed. This is where they're making up fascinating stories that are not plugged into the truth.
I agree. We just have a different idea of who the word they refers to.
We have some new fossils that I've gotten, and I'll have to show you this to you later because they're further down the stack.
You've edited your videos before. Why didn't you edit that?
One of the fossils that supposedly supports evolution is the fossil series of the horses. Now they say that first of all, the horse came from a creature that was about a foot tall and had 4 toes on every hoof.
Foot. Feet have toes. Toes have hoofs.
Then it changed into one that was bigger that had 3 toes on every hoof.
Foot.
Then it had like the main hoof and 2 toes that were further up the leg. Then just the main hoof and then the 1-toed hoof as in our modern horse.
Is a 1-toed hoof like my 5-toed toenails?
Now that all seems to be well and good, and actually as we go to the fossil record, we find fossils of animals that had 3 toes on every foot, that had the main hoof and then 2 toes further up the leg of the animal, and then the main hoof. And we'd say, wow, that proves the evolution of the horse. Just a minute, not so fast. Let's do some more good science, some more investigation. Do you know that we have living today in South America animals that have 3 toes on every leg, that have a main hoof with 2 toes further up the leg, and with the main hoof or toe? That's really not evolution.
Let's get the obvious stuff out of the way. Evolution does not preclude older forms from still existing in the modern world. You can still have animals with 3 roughly equal toes, or 1 large toe and 2 smaller toes, or whatever. Just because animals with a single toe evolved from animals with 3 toes doesn't mean that you can't still have animals with 3 toes. The reason the fossils are evidence for evolution is based not upon just the toes, but upon the full anatomy of the fossils and the sequence in which they're found in the fossil record. It illustrates a progression. You can absolutely still have animals alive with 3 toes. You could even have ones that exist within that progression in the fossil record. But within that progression of fossils, you're not going to find them before their place in the sequence. And the later evolved modern branches of the species, which exhibit characteristics that didn't exist back then, are not going to show up in the same place in the sequence as their ancestor species. And now that we have that established, just for fun, let's take a look at the animals in your example that supposedly still exist with these features. There's no real purpose to doing so because obviously their existence would demonstrate nothing, but it's kind of funny. The hind feet of South American ungulates of the order Leptopterna, and forgive me, I probably mispronounced that. Don't need to go farther than Wikipedia for this. Leptopterna is an extinct order of fossil-hoofed mammals from the Tertiary period, the blah 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 blah. Keyword being extinct.
Do you know that we have living today in South America animals that have 3 toes on every leg, that have a main hoof with 2 toes further up the leg, and with the main hoof or toe? Also, back to our first diagram, that Eohippus had 18 pairs of ribs. The Orohippus had 15 pairs of ribs. The Philiohippus has 19 pairs of ribs, and the Equus, our modern horse, has 18 pairs of ribs. 18, 15, 19, 18. I couldn't decide what it wants.
It's not true to simply say modern horses have 18 ribs. Some, like the Arabian horse, have 17, some have 19. But whatever, that has nothing to do with this, because the point is the sequence again. There is no end goal. Evolution does not require that the number of ribs always go up. The number of ribs can go up or down based on selection factors. It's just like the toes. You could start out with 3 toes, 2 of the toes could get smaller over generations, and then if it came about that those 2 smaller toes started to be more useful again, they could start to get bigger again over generations. That could happen over and over again. You identify that this is happening based on the sequence. Let's say that first you had a set of fossils which were anatomically almost identical, but a change is observed where a 3-toed foot with roughly equal toes becomes a 3-toed foot with 1 large toe and 2 smaller toes. And then you have another set that's roughly anatomically identical, having the previous change, a 3-toed foot with 2 of the toes being smaller, and within this set you see the number of ribs go from 18 pairs to 15. You're relatively safe to assume that this is a progression of generations, especially considering where you found them, so you have one change manifesting earlier and one change manifesting afterwards. And as you continue to do this all the way up through the fossil record, through the different strata, carefully comparing the anatomy of each fossil that you find, you can create a very smooth picture of the transition. The fact that the number of ribs going up and down is something that's occurring occasionally in the progression doesn't take away from the fact that it's a progression any more than does the fact that the shape of the toes is changing. This idea that evolution has to progress in a linear fashion towards a particular state is called orthogenesis, and it hasn't been widely accepted since the first half of the 20th century.
And actually, the more up-to-date books have thoroughly removed the horse evolution from them.
Bullshit. Zoology, 7th edition, McGraw-Hill by Miller and Harley, 2007, page 64, go fuck yourself. Although if you weren't just flat out lying, wouldn't that prove the honesty of the scientific community?
Because these were spotty finds in one part of the world, another part of the world, another part of the world. No, none of this evolutionary sequence was found in any one given place. They were all just pieced together.
Yes, contrary to popular belief, over the course of millions of years and thousands of generations, animals do not maintain cultural dying grounds where they migrate home to and all die one on top of the other. I'm sure the real scientists were just as shocked as you are to realize that.
One of the real landmarks and much touted evidence for evolution has been this fossil of Archaeopteryx. Now, Archaeopteryx is an amazing fossil because it has certain aspects that look very much like a reptile, and yet it has wings that look like a bird and had feathers. It has claws on its wings that midway out that looks kind of like a reptile. It's got teeth in its mouth, and a number of other features that look between a bird look like a reptile. And they say, wow, this is it. This is a real evolutionary link between reptiles and birds. Now, just think for a minute. Of the birds that we know, I'd say there's kind of like 4 kinds.
What? Wait, you're going to actually try and define kinds? Okay, listen up everybody. John's going to try and define biblical kinds of birds. I'm assuming that's what he means, or he wouldn't use the word kinds.
First are the ones that don't fly, like the ostrich.
Alright, so we've got a cassowary, a great auk, dodo, Falkland steamer duck, flightless cormorant, kiwi, Adelie penguin, New Caledonian rail, ostrich, terror bird, dead parrot, the flightless birds everyone's heard of.
Then we have ones that do fly, like the chicken, but they don't fly too much.
So we've got a chicken, turkey, flying steamer duck.
Then we have ones that fly better, like just the regular birds and crows and things like that.
There's a stork and a crow and a chickadee and a hummingbird and a flamingo and a hawk and a vulture and an albatross and a pelican.
Then we have the king of flight, which would be the eagles.
Eagle. Yep, that all checks out. Just from looking at those, I'm starting to think you didn't mean biblical kinds, though. But if that wasn't what you meant, as a creation scientist, you shouldn't have used the creation scientific term kind.
Now, if you were in an evolutionary process, coming from being a reptile into being a bird that would fly, what kind of feathers would you have? Well, you're just kind of getting new at this, and so it would seem to reason that the kind of feathers you're going to have are going to be basic feathers. But as it happens, we have a definitely preserved feather of an Archaeopteryx, and it's exactly the form that eagle's feathers are, designed for maximum flight. Archaeopteryx could and did fly. It was a flying creature.
Sure. But since Archaeopteryx's ancestors had feathers long before Archaeopteryx, I fail to see the relevance.
Now, the idea that it had claws on its wings, we have 3 living birds today that have claws on their wings. We have the Watsine, we have the ostrich, and we have the trucho. All of these have claws on their wings. Like this one of the Watsin of South America, the young use that claw in their wings to climb up through the trees until it develops enough and can take to flight, and then it quits using that claw, but they have claws there.
Okay, so more evidence for them having come from dinosaurs. What's your point? I mean, none of them are Archaeopteryx. They don't have the features of Archaeopteryx, so Archaeopteryx is not a fossilized one of them. I honestly just don't get what the argument is because you never made it.
As far as having teeth in their mouth, there are reptiles that have teeth. There are reptiles that don't have teeth. There are birds that don't have teeth, and there are some birds that do have teeth. I mean, even some of you. There's some of you that have teeth. Some of you don't have teeth.
Okay, same thing as before. What's the argument?
And even further, after Archaeopteryx had been talked about for some time, they found another bird 145 million years older than Archaeopteryx. And they said it was like a modern bird.
Called... Okay, I'll go look it up myself. Wasting my time. Alright, you're just fucking with me, right? Sending me on a classic wild goose chase or whatever kind of bird you're saying that was? There are no birds 145 million years older than Archaeopteryx. I'm not even convinced you heard that anywhere. I think you just made that up to waste my time.
So Archaeopteryx is just a species that existed that could fly, wasn't transitioned between anything.
Okay. I don't even get how you thought your argument led to that, but alright.
In the United Kingdom town of Wanton Bassett.
Wanton Bassett? I'm sure they'll really appreciate that in Wootton Bassett.
There are amazing fresh fossils that are coming up out of a bubbling mud spring. This is located near London. It's like a giant conveyor belt. Here we have a picture of it, and just this mud just bubbles out of the ground. And in that mud is coming out shells, pristine with their natural color, that are supposedly 165 million years old. But they still have coloring as if they were fresh. And some of them even have some pieces left of actual tissue in them.
This claim originates from the In Brief section of issue 1998 of New Scientist magazine. The outsides also retain their iridescence, says Hollingworth, and on the inside some of the bivalves still have their original organic ligaments. It's something of a strange claim that doesn't have any paper that I can find backing it up. According to someone on the Talk Origins Google group, he emailed Dr. Hollingworth for details. The details he says he received are now posted on Talk Origins itself. He says that contrary to the article on New Scientist's website, Dr. Hollingworth says that the ligaments were not actually the original organic material, but were replaced by a mineral. There's a reference to a paper in geology that I don't have access to. And frankly, none of this Talk Origins material seems solid enough to even be worth discussing. So let's look at this from a different angle. The claim that Answers in Genesis makes is that these shells cannot be millions of years old because they retain their iridescence and original organic ligaments, which of course leads them to the claim that if these are not millions of years old, then they are evidence for the global flood. That's a non sequitur. The fact that the things are there no matter what condition they're in, even if it was clear that these were 4,500 years old, which as you might expect it absolutely isn't, it still wouldn't be evidence of the effect of a global flood in the area. The fact that they're there is evidence that they're there. After that, you have to look for further evidence to determine the reason they're there.
Now they can't be 165 million years old, and yet they're coming out from the ground in this mud conveyor. That's a real problem for evolution, not for creationists, because we know everything was made 6 million years ago, and there was a worldwide flood, and so a lot of them could have been buried, and the mud is just bubbling up and bringing them out of the ground.
Just out of curiosity, have you actually tested these things to see if they're older than 4,500 years? That might be a little problematic. And if you haven't tested them for age, when your assertion requires them to be specifically around 4,500 years, not much older and not much younger, then it seems like your theory has a major gap that you better get at closing as soon as you can.
Evolutionists say sometimes the reason we don't find the intermediators between the different species is...
Hold on. We do. Every fossil that has ever been found that is anatomically somewhere between two other finds, be they fossils or currently living creatures, is an intermediary. A transitional fossil. But of course, as soon as we close one gap by putting a species in the middle, you guys say now you have two new gaps. Where are the species that go in between there? which means that no matter how many we ever find, even if we have every 100th generation, you'll say, why don't we have every 50th generation? And if we find that, you'll say, why don't you have every 25th generation?
Evolutionists say sometimes the reason we don't find the intermediators between the different species is because they had a lot of real soft tissue that didn't fossilize clearly enough so that we could have a good copy of it. Well, please tell me, what could be softer tissue than a jellyfish? They're about 99% water. And yet of jellyfish, here's a picture of one, we have fossils of jellyfish.
Sure, we have fossils of lots of things. That's why the word rarely is used when describing how often things like jellyfish fossilize instead of never. The conditions required are much more delicate, specific, and unusual.
There's often articles that come out purporting all different aspects of evolution. I say, enjoy yourself. You will be amazed at the things they say. Pay attention to what they say because they're going to mix true, good science with storytelling. The storytelling is not science. The pictures, photographs can be excellent science.
They'll mix true good science with storytelling, and pictures and photographs are excellent science. This from the guy who says dead fish never sink and a bird 145 million years older than Archaeopteryx was discovered, and who has insisted over and over and over again in like half of these videos that pictures are not science. Look, I know that making up your damn mind means that you have a particular position that people can attack, but if you don't make up your damn mind, you just look like a moron. Personally, if I were you and I thought my opinion was so solid, I would choose a specific position and defend it.
This also article of Time magazine says, Evolution's Big Bang. New discoveries show that life as we know it began in an amazing biological frenzy that changed the planet almost overnight. Did you get that? They're copying us. Overnight. That means from one day to the next. That's what the Bible talks about. God did one thing on one day, another thing on the next day. It was overnight, from one day to the next.
You don't read much, do you? That's not meant to be taken literally. Almost overnight is an expression that means unusually rapidly, in this case rapidly on a geologic timescale. Oh, and why the fuck are you quoting Time magazine? What does that have to do with the scientific community?
Now, as I read this article, it was an amazing article, had some excellent photographs of some very unusual fossils. Here's one that we can see that's rather prickly looking fella, and they just kind of flipped him over and drew him this way. I don't have any problem with that. It's a good possibility of how he looked. Strange creature. Don't know that we have any of those around today. But in all of this article, I was looking for the main concluding point. And here I give it to you exactly as it reads in the article by Time magazine, backed by millions of dollars, hundreds, thousands of trained, scientific, knowledgeable people.
You heard it here, folks. All that government funding for science is going straight to Time magazine. Who knew that a simple, non-scientific news magazine was one of the main scientific sources for the United States of America, the scientific powerhouse of the world?
This is what they wrote. Here then are the highlights from the tale. That's their word, not mine. The tale.
Tale, noun. 1. A report, narrative, or story. I'd mention how the simple, popular writing style of Time magazine has no relevance to anything, but honestly, I don't even know what your point was because it's a report.
That scientists are piecing together of a unique and dynamic time in the history of the Earth, when continents were drifting apart, genetic programs were in flux, and tiny organisms in vast oceans dreamed of growing larger. Did you get that?
Yeah, I think I did. Just get it over with so I can smack you, you dunce.
Tiny organisms in vast oceans dreamed of growing larger. What are they saying? Well, there was Bacteria Barbara and Bacteria Peter. And Barbara says, "Oh, Pete, I just feel so inferior. Oh, Barbie, I do too. Oh, Pete, what are we going to do? Oh, I don't know, Barbie. Oh, Barbie, I have an idea. What? Tell me, Pete. Listen, let's dream about growing bigger. Oh, Pete, that's a wonderful idea." That's what the article says. They dreamed of growing bigger. And so that explained everything.
decide if that's worse or better than full Crocoduck, but it's up there.
You know, humans, for as far as history can tell us, has almost always dreamed of flying. And you know what? To date, we cannot fly. We have machines that take us. We can make hang gliders. But there's not a single human being that has sprouted one single feather. Dream about flying all you want. You will never grow feathers.
If I just agree with you, will you shut up and stop hurting my brain?
And so this stuff, the thing is, they have this, the Cambrian explosion, as it's called, from one day to the next, all of a sudden, boom, all these creatures are there. What happened? Well, I think it just really fits that God made them.
Okay. Fine. Great.
And that they happened at the bottom of the ocean. They were the first ones to be buried. And so that's where they are.
Sure, whatever. I'll just ignore all the flounders and crabs and shit that aren't there. Please just stop talking.
By the way, do you know what a living fossil is? Again, I don't want any family jokes. Don't make fun of any of your neighbors.
That's okay. You're not my family or my neighbor. Hey, maybe you should use that as evidence of a benevolent God.
Something that is assumed by evolution to have been completely extinct from the earth. And the only remembrance you have of them are some fossils. And so the thing is, all of a sudden, lo and behold, here's one of these things alive and basically unchanged after all these millions of years of evolution. That's called a living fossil. One of the most outstanding ones happened in the 1930s. Some fishermen off the coast, eastern coast of Africa, pulled up in their fishing net a coelacanth.
You said they're basically unchanged after millions of years, but that's not true. But I do understand that what you actually mean is that they're not extinct in favor of radically different descendants.
Now the coelacanth is actually older than a dinosaur. This is like having a living dinosaur, even better, because the coelacanths, according to evolution, later became the amphibians, which later became the reptiles, which later became the dinosaurs.
To the best of my knowledge, nobody says that was actually coelacanths, but fine, let's just go with it being coelacanths.
Well, the coelacanths are still alive. They're a fish that's about 6 feet long. Here's the fossil of one. And this article by National Geographic says that the fossilized tail looks almost identical as a photostatic copy of the tail of the real fish.
What about the rest of it? I mean, not that it matters, because even if it's alive exactly morphologically unchanged, it says nothing about the theory of evolution, but still, I'm curious. You know, especially since you're taking this from National Geographic instead of an actual science journal. It's just always interesting to compare the shoddy popular tripe in National Geographic to actual science, you know.
Now this man, Dr. Joachim Shevin, is an Australian who has, from private funds, his own museum of about 500 different living fossils.
I'm going to have to stop you right there. Number one, as I've already said, living fossils say nothing about the theory of evolution because the theory of evolution does not predict the automatic death of species after a certain set amount of time. And number two, this sounds like some Harun Yahya shit. If people want to see this kind of stuff, they can go read the Atlas of Creation, which is great for a laugh, and I would recommend you watch some videos about it, but we don't need to go in detail here.
And these are more and more embarrassing to the evolutionists, finding these living fossils, because they don't go along with this idea of evolution because they're unchanged.
They go along beautifully with the theory of evolution. If there are no selection forces at play which would make new features beneficial or old features detrimental, natural selection does not take effect. Duh.
Here's this fossil of this special leaf. Here's the actual living leaf below, unchanged. Here's this special kind of a wasp.
Wow, I just skipped a full minute of this before, and now you're back at it again? You know, that might actually matter if you established your premise first, but you didn't, so it doesn't.
Here's this special kind of a wasp.
Fine, you're just not going to let it go, are you? Fine, make your little presentation and then let's get on with it.
Fossilized, here's the living ones down below, basically unchanged over a period of some millions of years. This flying fish could always fly. Here's the fossil of them, here's the living one. Fossils are identical. No significant change over a period of millions of years. Flying fish could always fly.
Wait a minute, is your argument that because living species look like fossils of the same species that change has never occurred in any species? You say, look, here's them and here's their fossils. They look the same. If the species didn't look like the fossils of that species, it wouldn't be fossils of that species. So obviously they look the same. You're an absolute buffoon. Oh, and by the way, Sora Adnan Akhtar and Joachim Shevin, because they're actually devoting time to this argument, whereas you're just pulling it from them.
Now, the trilobites are counted to be one of the oldest multi-celled creatures that we have. Now this one, you can see on the right and left hand of this transparency, what is actually the two halves of a fossil, which is a human shoe imprint. It's just the two halves. And on the left-hand part, you can see where someone had actually stepped on and crushed, as the enlarged picture shows, a trilobite. It stepped on and crushed a live trilobite. You can see the dent on the right-hand side of the heel of that shoe.
I don't see where you're looking. If you're going to present something as evidence to your audience, you have to explain to your audience why it's evidence. And at this point you haven't, and I don't even know what you're looking at. Now normally I'd bother to actually look up the claims that you're making, which of course end up only being on creationist websites, but that's beside the point. In this case I'm not going to bother looking it up because you haven't even shown me where this footprint is.
Now there's many stories, many quotes that we could have of different scientists. Stephen Jay Gould is a professor of geology and paleontology, study of fossils in Harvard, and he says this.
Lunch break's over, man. Back underground. We got quotes to mine. Chemist, scientist, happily married man, auto mechanic John Pendleton claims to be a creationist. But look at all these quotes that prove that he actually believes in the theory of evolution by natural selection, which in turn, due to the fact that he believes in it, disproves creationism.
Go along with this idea of evolution. This is it. This is a real evolutionary link between reptiles and birds. You see a series, a sequence, a chain, if you please, of slight gradual changes from one species to another, each one changing a little bit more, and thereby we get all the different life forms through a chain of changes from one cell to a multi-cell and different creatures that eventually we evolved into man. And actually as we go to the fossil record, we find fossils of animals that had 3 toes on every foot, that had the main hoof and then 2 toes further up the leg of the animal and then the main hoof. And we'd say, wow, that proves the evolution of the horse. First of all, the horse came from a creature that was about a foot tall and had 4 toes on every hoof. Then it changed into one that was bigger that had 3 toes on every hoof. Then it had like the main hoof and 2 toes that were further up the leg. Then just the main hoof and then the 1-toed hoof as in our modern horse.
Do you see the problem, John? No, what am I saying? Of course you don't. But I do, so piss off, you slime bag. I'm skipping your quote mining section.
Now, we showed you an offer earlier to make $250,000 by providing empirical science evidence for macroevolution. We got a better offer. Just go out there and find a Fishibibian, Amphitilly, or a rept bird, and you will be the richest person in the world. Name the price that you want. Neither you, nor your children, nor your grandchildren, nor your great-grandchildren will ever have to work. You'll be the richest person on the face of the earth if you find one of these.
Oh no, John. I know you're a muttonhead. I know that. But I asked you in the beginning when I thought you were going full Crocoduck to not do it. And then you went there. We were almost at the end of the episode. Why did you do it, John? Why did you do it?
Now let me give you a little hint. If you're in school, please finish your school, do your homework, do your housework. In your free time, go look for these things. If you have a job, stay in your job, stay with your business. In your free time, go look for these things. We don't want anybody to starve to death for lack of income in case you don't find one of the missing links.
Yeah, just on the off chance that you don't find a bird with a snake for a head. I mean, you're probably gonna find one, but just in case, you want to be financially secure before you go looking for it.
And of course, the only thing that we can say with certainty about the missing links is that they're still missing. Or they probably never even existed.
So let me get this straight. What you can say with certainty about the missing links is that they're missing, even though they're sitting in museums right now. And what you can say with certainty about God is that he exists, even though there's not a shred of evidence suggesting that. I think you need to take your certainty meter into the shop for a recalibration.
Let me give you a breakdown of how basically all the fossils are grouped together. 95% of all fossils are marine animals with shells and other invertebrates. 95%. 95% of the 5% of the fossils that remain are algae and plants. 95% of the 0.25% remaining fossils are those of invertebrates and insects, mainly insects. 95% of the 0.0125% of the remaining fossils are vertebrates, mainly fish. 95% of the few vertebrates of land animals consist of only one bone.
Am I the only one who's suspicious of statistics where every single number is 95%? 95% of this is this, and 95 of the remaining 5% is this, and 95 of the remaining 5% is this, and 95% of the remaining 5% is this, and 95% of the remaining 5% is this. It just smacks of not actually doing any research because I don't think the numbers are actually that clean. Regardless though, when the number of fossils that have been found at a conservative estimate are in the multiple hundreds of millions, so many that fossils are sold at thousands of little souvenir shops as trinkets, and large museums have millions each, 5% of 5% of 5% of 5% or whatever is still a huge number.
All of the species of the fossils represent species perfectly formed and complete.
Every fossilized animal ever found was a fully functional animal, which shows and proves that all of these prehistoric animals appeared fully formed, exclamation mark. They did not evolve over millions of years.
There is not even one transitional fossil.
Oh, I agree. There's not one. I would guess closer to hundreds of millions, and that's just the ones we've found so far.
Who do you want to put your confidence in? Someone that was there at the beginning, as God was, or people that are still learning?
I think the better question is, who do I put my confidence in? People who have so firmly made up their minds to believe in God that they hate learning and actively fight against it and try and prevent other people from doing it? Or people who are still learning? I can tell you who I think's more worthy of being listened to, the ones who are actually open to allowing reality to dictate what's real.
I think it's obvious that the Bible has the answer once again.
Yeah, I know you do. Reality is irrelevant. The Bible has the answer. As usual.
See you later. God bless you.
Oh yeah, he'll be just fine with me. We're getting together for some drunken Xbox later. Whenever he gets really hammered, he's always throwing blessings around, you know? He's one of those real lovey kind of drunks. Anyway, yeah, I'm actually a bit late for that, so see ya.